Hi, my name is Richard Dunn. I'm the COO of the Atlanta Voice newspaper, and we're proud to welcome into the warehouse studios here in our facility Lieutenant Governor Geoff Duncan and the publisher of the Georgia Asian Times, Wong. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in today.
Glad to be here.
Oh man! So today we're going to get into a conversation with Lieutenant Governor Duncan here about some issues that are important to the ethnic community here in the metropolitan Atlanta area. Mr. Warren, why don't you tell the audience here a little bit about your publication?
Well, I represent Georgia Asian Times. It is the largest paper to cover the Asian American Pacific Islander community in Georgia. We've been around since 2004. Yeah.
Right. And I represent the Atlanta Voice newspaper. We have been in publication since 1966. Our motto is a people without a voice cannot be heard. And so we have shared stories that have been important to the African American diaspora for the last 60 years here in Atlanta, Georgia. Why don't we kick it off with you, publisher? And you have a question today for the lieutenant?
Sure, I do. I have a long list of questions for Lieutenant Governor Duncan.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
I'd like to start off with the first question, specifically on your proposal that you're going to use 10% of the $1.7 billion rainy funds for childcare, housing, and miscellaneous initiative. Is that enough to with the 10% to cover all the activities that you have in mind?
Well, we start with it's $17 billion is what's in the state's rainy day fund. And that catches a lot of people off guard. That's nearly 50% of what our state's annual budget is. I want to take 10% of that 1.7 billion and immediately put it into a jumpstart fund to wrap our hands around those stuck in some of those vicious cycles of affordability issues and poverty. Some of that is absolutely try to better fund the CAPS program to lower childcare costs. Some folks are willing and able to go to work, but they can't because they can't afford childcare. This CAPS program with a few $100 million can lower those costs for those needy families. Secondly, I think we need to lower affordable housing costs. We need to wrap our hands around some of those opportunities and some of those programs. I know Mayor Dickens is doing an amazing job here in Atlanta. I think we can help scale that up with a few $100 million. In Savannah and other parts of the state, they're doing the same thing. And you know, we've also need to expand Medicaid. And I think there's an opportunity to take down a significant majority portion of that is from federal funding, but we also can use some of those funds for state funding. And last but not least, the TANF program has been around for a long, long time, but it's being underutilized. The TANF program is a very nimble program that helps somebody afford utility bills when they can't meet them, or it helps them with transportation needs to get to and from work. Just a short-term funding program. Right now, to qualify for the program, according to the state law, you've got to work full time for less than minimum wage. We can change that and better invest. It's a great jump start for those families.
Mhm. Well, I'd like to follow up with the question on Medicare. Do you need to work with House legislators to get that going, or do you think, the future governor of Georgia, you can push this initiative forward without the state legislative support?
Well, the law says you need the legislature to expand Medicaid. That was passed, I think, somewhere in the range of 2014. But yes, and I think this is a really good opportunity for us Democrats to really create a moment in time where even we kind of force Republicans' hands. They even agree. I'm a former Republican. I studied every way possible to improve our healthcare system in the state. The only way to do it is through Medicaid expansion. I think even Republicans know that. And so I think we could definitely build consensus not only with Democrats at the state house, but also with folks in those blue districts or purple districts. And then also I think the majority of Republicans know it's the best way to go forward. It may not be a perfect fit, but it's the best fit.
I have a question about technical colleges. Technical colleges are often the pathway for economic mobility for people here in Georgia. Oftentimes, it's a place where working adults can expand their education, and oftentimes, it's the place where the first generation high school graduate or the one who's going to secondary, um, upper school, or college, for lack of better words, is going to school. What can your administration do to ensure that technical colleges here in the state of Georgia are providing pathways for the your the citizens here?
Yeah, technical schools have been an amazing asset for Georgia, not only for those folks that are coming out of high school that aren't necessarily wanting to go into a 4-year education, but want to figure out a career path. That's certainly an opportunity. But they've also created, tailwinds in rural communities because they're more scattered across the state. But I think also they've been a huge economic development tool for us as we've talked to private sector companies moving here, wanting to invest and expand. We can really utilize and integrate those private sector opportunities and jobs training skills into those technical schools. So if the question is what do, we continue to add layer on additional resources, give them opportunities to continue to expand. I think every day that we move forward in time, more and more career opportunities are opening up with technical school, 2-year education paths, even certifications, welding and things of that nature, trades, and also technology. I think as we continue to look at opportunities to expand the scope of pathways, not only in high school, but also in technical schools, this opportunity to software, hardware, AI, things of that nature that could really be amplified in those technical school programs. So I think we're headed in a good direction. I think if we can continue to focus, we could head in an even better direction.
You may mention in your answer a little bit about high schools. As an educator myself, what are some of the things that your administration can do to kind of support teachers in the high school, middle school, and elementary school level? Are there things that you're thinking about in terms of increasing pay, school supplies, and things of that? So, how can we fund teachers in education in those levels?
I look through the issue of education policy through the lens of a father of 3 kids in public schools. All 3 of our kids are coming through public schools. My wife and I met in a public school in high school, Chattahoochee and Fulton County, and so that's the lens I look through.
Mhm.
I think we've got to go do the right thing. Most legislators know what the right thing to do is, and that's reform the QBE formula. The QBE funding formula is over 40 years old, and it doesn't take into account the necessary weight for poverty in certain districts and school zones. Doesn't take technology, inflation, and the list goes on and on. So we've got to do the right thing and reform the QBE formula beyond partisan lines. That's first and foremost, so that we can do those things that turn teaching opportunities into career paths so that teachers can go to school, become a teacher, and retire as a teacher, and not just be able to fit certain economic gaps in their life. And so that means that we've got to do a better job of paying teachers and other education professionals that wrap around there. We also need to be able to give the school resources. You mentioned school supplies and things of that nature. I mean, we should not be underpaying teachers and then sending them off into the classroom to have to self-provide hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of school supplies. We should be able to have a better program. I think it's important to understand, there's some that are out there talking about eliminating property tax and eliminating income tax and whatnot. Until we take care of our educational track, until we start to better invest, I think that's a frivolous conversation to have.
Lieutenant Governor, you have called Donald Trump January 6th, quote unquote, a conspired attempt to overthrow democracy. If you become governor, what specific executive actions would you take to insulate Georgia election from federal interference and pressure?
Well, certainly there's no doubt I'm willing and able to stand up to Donald Trump. I've done it since the early hours after the 2020 election when he tried to lie, cheat, and steal an election here in Georgia. I didn't care which political party I was in. I was not going to let that happen on my watch. And so I've continued to consistently tell the story of the truth and not let him twist and turn. But it's much, much broader than that. Donald Trump is attacking the very elements of democracy. This 2020 or this raid of the Fulton County Elections Office or warehouse had nothing to do with the 2020 election. We've certified, verified, hand counted, recounted, done everything possible to prove that election was legitimate. It's about sowing seeds of doubt into these 26 midterms in November. It's what it's completely about. It's trying to layer in a level of doubt amongst his base, and we can't let it happen. We've got to continue to stand up and educate and tell the truth. I think as I see my campaign events continue to grow, that's not just Democrats, it's independents that are willing to say out loud, I'm supporting a Democrat. But then also this batch of disgusted Republicans that continue to grow bigger and bigger and bigger every night at our events because they're embarrassed of Donald Trump. They can't explain Donald Trump. And it's so much broader. I mean, we have to push back when He wants to use state resources for ICE raids. You got to have a governor willing and able to stand up, whether it be vocally stand up with executive power or use the court system to push back. The tariffs are absolutely destroying uh, our farmers, our business owners in all communities. And the list goes on and on and on. So you've got to be willing and able to stand up, whether it's using the courts, the public forum, or the bully pulpit. I certainly will do that. Every time Donald Trump's wrong, I'm going to tell him.
Following up on that, I'm sure you watched last night's State of the Union address. What are your thoughts and comments on that?
Well,
His speech specifically.
yeah, I think it's just more of the same thing, more of the lies and the twisted truths and the made up facts and figures. That I feel bad for our country. I feel bad for people that are following Donald Trump off this cliff. I worry about the future of this country. I worry about the future of our economy. I worry about the future of democracy when I hear somebody that reckless with the truth and that willing to not focus on the real issues. On my campaign, I talk about the affordability crisis, the healthcare crisis, and the Donald Trump crisis. Those are the three things everybody wakes up worried about, even Republicans. But Donald Trump doesn't have a plan for that, right? With the millions of people that are losing healthcare, don't have healthcare. What did he do last night to help them? Those people that are sitting in the emergency room waiting to either go get seen by the doctor and bankrupt themselves or walk out and get back in their car because they can't afford it to just deal with their own health concerns on their own or their kids. Um, he's not serious with leading this country. He's only serious about enriching himself and stroking his ego.
Small businesses here in Georgia make up, the bulk of our ecosystem. A lot of entrepreneurs, younger people are not seeking jobs; they're seeking, how to control their destiny. What is your administration planning on doing to support small business owners here, to kind of rectify some of the DEI hiccups that have happened under the current administration?
So I've been a small business owner my whole life. My wife and I started our first business as soon as my baseball career ended out of our living room, and we eventually built that business and sold it, and have started several others. So yeah, I always look through the lens of a small business owner. It's hard. It's hard in a good times, right, to be able to find the capital necessary to buy inventory and invest in employees. And most days, most Fridays, you're the last person to get paid. And I think you need to have a governor that looks through that lens and understands how difficult that is. But these are very difficult times for a small business owner, with the difficulties being able to find or afford health care. Most folks in small businesses don't have group plans, and so they're leaning into private commercial plans, or they're using Medicaid, or they get ACA subsidies, and all of that is vapor these days, with the lack of leadership from Donald Trump. But I think specifically to the tail end of your question, uh, look, this administration and Donald Trump has attempted to have an outright racist attack on the DEI process and demonized and politicized in an unfair way. That is in the home of the civil rights movement. We're sitting right here in the heart and soul of the civil rights movement. There's pressure on the airport to not use DEI contracting practices. There's pressure on businesses to not use diverse and equitable and inclusive, even if they want to,
Mhm.
which everybody should want to be diverse and equitable and inclusive in how they operate their business. As governor, I will have the most diverse state government in the state's history. We will invite folks from all corners, all makes and models, all races, all orientations to show up and be a part of our story as the Georgia state government, because not because we want to check boxes, but because we want that perspective, because we want to do the right thing, because we want to surround ourselves with thoughts and ideas and perspective in a way that makes us better and makes us operate better. Um, I think we have a really neat opportunity in Georgia, right? Obviously, I want to win this election, but we have to make sure that a Donald Trump sock puppet is not the next governor. Because if we do, then everything that we want to solve, every problem that we're talking about, whether it be healthcare, affordability, or diverse and equitable and inclusive hiring practices, none of it's going to be on the table. And that's what I remind Democrats in every room I walk into. A second place trophy is not going to solve any of these problems. We've got to win.
I'd like for you to expand your plans on affordable housing if you win the governor's race. What are your specific points of action to tackle the affordable housing issue in the state of Georgia?
So right now, the crisis doesn't have any sort of zip code specific. It's affecting everybody, whether you're somebody trying to retire into a home, or you're a first time home buyer trying to be able to afford these escalated prices. My heart goes to that person that's working full time that still can't afford a roof over their head, that's having to surf couches with family members and friends, or having to take a bath in a public restroom, or working multiple jobs and having to sleep in the back of your car. That's where my heart goes. Throughout my career in the private sector and also in public service, I've realized the best, most effective way is to find programs that are working and scale them up, give them the resources they need to scale up and to kind of mass produce what they're doing. I mentioned earlier Andre Dickens, Mayor Dickens has got an incredible mindset on this affordable housing. He's building quick and efficient modular models that are allowing us for pennies on the dollar almost to be able to produce multiple units and meet these people where they're at. But I think it's also additional the wraparound services with the intentionality, making sure that in these communities of affordable housing programs that they've got behavioral health or mental health services, they've got healthcare in general, they've got career training, they've got all types of services to help those people get up and back on their feet and to be able to move through that. You look at Savannah. We've been down there on an affordable housing tour. There's 7 different community groups that have worked together in a public-private partnership with Dundee Cottages to take folks in those difficult situations. So the answer is there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but we've got to be willing and able to add resources. We need to be able to add dollars to it. That's why I want to use such a significant portion of the state's budget, the state surplus, to really amplify these groups. And every Albany and Valdosta and Augusta and Atlanta and Sandy Springs and Rome and everywhere else, they all have those affordable housing issues. We just need to start to be able to give them the tools they need.
We talked a lot today about the cost of healthcare, but access to healthcare is also an issue here in the state of Georgia. You have a lot of hospitals closing and going away. Any plans from your administration to resolve some of the access to healthcare issues?
Yeah, access is a big issue. I mean, the metrics are not good for us when you talk about how many counties don't have OBGYNs or primary care physicians or pediatricians. I mean, you can't improve your health standings if you don't have access to those doctors. So we need to continue to amplify programs and look for ways to drive those medical professionals into those rural communities. We also need to make sure we protect those hospital systems that in hospitals in rural parts. One of the first bills I ever passed as a state legislator was the rural hospital tax credit bill. Brings $100 million a year to 54 rural hospitals. As governor, will double that to make that to $200 million per year to give those communities that safeguard against having to shut down those rural hospitals. And it's being stressed. I mean, when folks show up without health insurance, they're still having to provide those medical services for $0. Also think we need to take a bigger bite out of infant and maternal mortality rates. I think one, expanding Medicaid is going to help soften some of those numbers, but there's more to be done. We've got to make sure we focus on prenatal and postpartum care. I think we can reach deeper into those communities with technology, with telehealth, and be able to amplify some of those regional healthcare providers and be able to look for opportunities. But I also think behavioral health is another way that we can use technology in more rural settings to be able to reach into those communities and help. So you got to have a governor that wants to expand healthcare and not weaponize or politicize it. Donald Trump and his brand of the Republican Party has weaponized healthcare in a way that's costing literally millions of Georgians their lives, or their health.
You just used the word weaponize. Well, he has weaponized the Homeland Security ICE to terrorize so many different states. I'm sure in the near future he'll be eyeing on Georgia. What is your plan as governor if ICE start landing here and threatening our immigrant community in Georgia?
It really, I don't know, just struck me so deep down when I watched that Hyundai raid happening and I watched Georgia State troopers following down the interstate supporting that federal ICE raid down there at the Hyundai plant, which was completely misguided. It was un-American, in my opinion, and to watch the fallout from that. I mean, the South Korean community or country invested billions of dollars. I was at that ribbon cutting with that plant when I was lieutenant governor, all for an administrative hurdle that would have taken just probably minutes to solve. Uh, when somebody wants to make a point but not make a difference, it's usually a pretty shallow reason. As governor, I will not use state resources to amplify these ICE raids. They're toxic, they're un-American, and they're deadly, as we've seen play out in Minneapolis. I think additionally, we've got to use the court system to the best of our ability. We've seen other governors like Governor Newsom, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, and others that have used the court system to push back. The courts have not been perfect, but they have certainly been effective. I think we saw the Supreme Court overturned the tariffs and did the right thing. But as governor, if the president wants to utilize the National Guard troops to simply pick a fight, not to protect our people, I'll use the courts to push back. And same with the inhumane ICE raids. We've got to do something. We cannot just sit back and let this be disrupted just because Donald Trump wants to fan the flames of his ego.
I'd like to get a gauge of your positioning on cannabis and medical marijuana here in the state of Georgia. Any perspective on what that looks like moving forward here in the state?
Well, I worked really hard when I was a state representative to be able to create the medical cannabis opportunity here in Georgia. There was actually a very young child that lived in my district, and her mom came down to the Capitol. I really didn't know much about the issue, but the mom brought Kendall down in her wheelchair, and she was suffering from over 200 seizures a day. And we were able to get that bill up and going. And of course, to break the strings of gravity for medical cannabis, it takes a lot. And certainly, we're on the road to being able to deliver that in an effective way across the state. I think we've got to continue to progress and look for opportunities to make right-sized decisions and not overreact, but also not underreact on the issue. I think it's an issue that I think folks are very passionate about. And I think they want to see us take right-sized steps. I think empowering communities through the ballot is an opportunity for us to get a flavor for where people's heads are at in Georgia.
You have acknowledged that you didn't get the um, guns issues right as a Republican legislator. You're now supporting universal background checks, red flag laws, and safe storage requirements. What do you say to the millions of Georgian gun owners who may see that shift as a threat to their Second Amendment rights?
This is an issue where I think the last stat I saw where 90% of Americans want universal background checks, 85% want red flag laws, and a similar number for in-home safe storage laws. The masses are with us on this issue, and Republicans are really wrong, and they know they're wrong on this issue. They're just going to have to look in front of the crowd and say, hey, I'm wrong on this issue. As governor, I will lead the efforts in trying to pass that universal background checks and red flag laws because it makes all the sense in the world. I've been very public about this since my early days of being a state legislator and thinking the NRA had anybody's best interest at heart. They don't. They've got their own, and they're not concerned with the things that I'm concerned about as the father of three kids. What most people are concerned about. When you watch these mass shootings play out, and you hear the stories and weeks and months later about how it all came to be, and realizing that just a small checks and balance system on that process could have stopped or altered the course of history and saved those people's lives, whether they be kids or coworkers or church members or whatnot. Uh, I'm going to follow what 90% of Georgians want us to do, and that's going to be to pass uh, common sense gun legislation. And I believe a majority of even Republicans are on board with that.
So my question rolls into mental health and the unhoused here in the state of Georgia. Um, do you believe the state is investing enough in inpatient and community-based behavioral services? And if not, what would you do to expand them?
No, the answer is no. Everyone that you walk by is faced some sort of mental health issue, whether it be themselves or their family or a coworker or a neighbor, somebody that's close to their inner circle. And so we've got to take this seriously. We've got to be able to have opportunities, access to care. We've got to treat mental health the same as we do physical health. And that includes looking for opportunities to even better serve with insurance to make sure folks aren't limiting themselves because they can't afford access. Uh, but we also, as a state's perspective, have to better invest. I think there's something coming through the legislature trying to build for the first time in decades a mental health hospital. I think that's a great step in the right direction. I think giving folks the opportunity to be able to deal with whether it be one prescription or one therapy or one diagnosis away from being able to get back on their feet so that they're not caught in some vicious cycle of being incarcerated or unemployable or unhoused. Mental health has an intersection in all of those. So I do think we have to step up as a state. So I think it's a combination of more investment in the opportunity, working with counties and locals to making sure they're more nimble with how we are able to execute those facilities, but also putting pressure on the insurance space to have more expanded coverage.
Well, seems like we are coming close to an end, but I have a final question for you, Lieutenant Governor. Uh, Specifically on average Georgian concern about high living costs and affordability. As governor, what specific plans do you plan to implement within 100 days in office to tackle those issues?
So the first 100 days coincides with the legislature, and so a majority of what we're going to do has to involve the legislature. And so, working across party lines, building consensus, and really putting people in a position to succeed for their districts, not for their politics, I think is important as a governor. So, I think the first step on the affordability issues are to really get this Jumpstart Fund up and going day one. $1.7 billion to be able to better fund the CAPS program, the TANF program, affordable housing programs, and be able to position the budget so the legislature can expand Medicaid. I think those are huge opportunities to succeed in those first 100 days on tackling affordability. But I also think you have to continue to focus on how we continue to grow this economy. There are headwinds every which way. Donald Trump's tariffs make no sense at all. They're causing businesses to shut down and lay off people and slow down investments. As governor, we're going to continue to look for opportunities to grow a statewide economy in a meaningful, substantive way to drive those economic development opportunities, whether they be in state, inside our country, or even from around the world, to come here and invest here in Georgians. I also think it's important for us to make sure we take on this public education situation where we need to dramatically improve our output and how we educate our kids. And certainly some of that's funding, but some of that's approach, and making sure our schools are producing 21st century ready students who are able to tackle a career, whether it's the day after they graduate from high school, the day after they graduate from a 2-year technical school, or the day they graduate from medical school, or somewhere in between.
I have no more questions.
No more questions. Fun but a serious question. As an Atlanta guy and a former baseball player, as governor, what are you prepared to do to make sure the Braves win the pennant again?
Man, I am a baseball fan. You know, one of the most often asked questions I get is when the Marlins come to town, because that's who drafted me. I played in their system for 6 years.
Yeah.
Folks will say, Jeff, who are you rooting for tonight? The Marlins or the Braves? And I'm like, that's the easiest question I ever had. I'm rooting for the Braves. The Marlins fired me.
Hey, that's a good answer. Thank you. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you
Appreciate
for
the
your
opportunity.
time.
Thank you so
For
much.
your
Yeah,
time.
it's
Yeah.
been great.
Thank you.
So signing off here at the Atlanta Voice and Warehouse Studios. We'll be back.